Wayne Mueller will be preaching. If you don't know him, he's a real great guy. He is one of the leaders in the district of the Wesleyan Church, and he always has a good message to share. So be sure to come next week and catch that. If you'd pray with me before we start. I always need some prayer power before public speaking. So if you'd pray with me. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for today. I thank you for everybody that could be here today. I ask you to please be with us. I ask you please help me to speak your message clearly, and ask that you'd give everybody the ability to understand it, and hopefully take away something good from it today. Please bless this time, and I ask you please watch over your people everywhere who are meeting today. And I'd ask that you'd please especially bless Pastor Keegan and Haley and refresh them while they're on vacation. Amen. Okay, so this Tuesday, this week, you're going to the doctor, Botox shots for your necks. Would you like to pray for that right now? All right, let's do it. Dear Father in heaven, I bring before you my brother Chris. Lord, you know that he has had just months and years, Lord, of suffering with the pain in his neck, Lord, and the cramping. I'd ask, Lord, that this doctor's appointment that he has on Tuesday would go really well, that these Botox shots would give him relief from the pain, Lord. And we'd ask, Lord, that you'd be healing that neck and giving Chris back, Lord, some quality of life. Amen. So today's message that I had to share with you today is pretty fun. At least I think it's a pretty fun one. So I'd ask that you kind of just be prepared to hopefully take this in, be learning something hopefully, but I guess don't get so relaxed you fall asleep, but enjoy it, and I guess at the end of the sermon, I hope that you're kind of in awe of God about what He has done. So to introduce today's topic, I'd like to start out with a short story from the New Testament. The setting is first century Israel. It's on a Sunday, and it's the Sunday that's a couple days after Jesus was crucified. So earlier in the morning on this particular Sunday, some women went to Jesus' tomb to anoint his body, actually give him a proper burial, and they find it's empty. And so there's confusion. His disciples don't know what happens. Everybody's wondering where the body went. And this story takes place a little later in the day. So this is Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 27. The story is titled, On the Road to Emmaus. Now that same day, so the day they found the tomb empty, two of them, that's two of Jesus' followers, were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and don't know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed, before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Now, this is a little bit funny if you think about it. Jesus has had a rough weekend. He just got crucified, for goodness sakes. And one of the first things he does after rising from the dead is a very rabbi thing to do. he goes and finds a captive audience, a 7-mile long captive audience, and gives them a good lesson. Now, I would have loved to have been there and heard this conversation. If you think about it, if you had Jesus take you through the Old Testament and say, hey, this is about me, this is about me, this is about me, I think it would have been a phenomenal lesson. And I'm a little disappointed that it wasn't written down. Like, what was this discussion about? So today, what I'm going to talk about is one of the things that I think could have been part of this 7-mile journey to Emmaus. So if you will, if you'd turn with me to Leviticus chapter 23, way back in the Old Testament. About 3,400 years ago, somewhere around there. The setting is in the middle of nowhere between Egypt and modern-day Israel. And Moses, the man of God, is giving the ancient Hebrews some instructions. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, 'These are my appointed feasts, the appointed feasts of the Lord, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies. The Sabbath. There are 6 days when you may work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of rest, a day of sacred assembly. You are not to do any work wherever you live. It is a Sabbath to the Lord. And these are the Lord's appointed feasts, the sacred assemblies you are to proclaim at their appointed times. The Lord's Passover begins at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. On the 15th day of that month, the Lord's Feast of Unleavened Bread begins. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. For 7 days present an offering made to the Lord by fire. And on the 7th day, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work.' The Lord said to Moses, 'Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of the first grain you harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord, so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, you must sacrifice as a burnt offering to the Lord a lamb a year old without defect, together with its grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of flour, of fine flour, mixed with oil, an offering made to the Lord by fire, a pleasing aroma, and its drink offering, a quarter of a hin of wine. You must not eat any bread or roasted or new grain until the very day you bring this offering to your God. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, wherever you live.'" So it's a little tough to picture these instructions, but this is how that worked out, say in modern day's calendar. So Passover happens on the 14th day of the first month. So let's just say that falls on a Monday. Passover's on Monday. The Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on Tuesday because it's the 15th day. Right? So they're always back to back. Then on Sunday, or the first day of the week after the Sabbath, they celebrate the Festival of First Fruits. So celebration on Monday, Tuesday, and they wait. Festival of First Fruits happens on Sunday. Here I'd like to have a little discussion about the Hebrew calendar. So the Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar, right? It's based on the moon phases. And so when celebrations occur vary widely from year to year. So if you've ever kept track of the Passover, sometimes it's celebrated in March, sometimes it's celebrated out in April, if you're comparing it to our solar calendar. So keep that in mind. Because of that big shift that happens with the lunar calendar, about every 9 years or so, the Festival of Passover, the Feast of Passover, will fall on a Friday, which will put the Feast of Unleavened Bread on a Saturday. The Festival of First Fruits will fall on the first day of the week. That's Sunday. So every 9 years or so, these festivals are going to fall back to back to back. Keep that in the back of your mind. The other thing I'd like to discuss about the Hebrew calendar is their system of keeping track of days. So for the ancient Hebrew, the day always started in the evening. So it doesn't start at 12 a.m. in the morning. It always starts at twilight or at dusk. So this comes from Genesis chapter 1, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. God saw that the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. The light he called day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and morning the first day. So for them, their day starts in the evening. All right. Let's go back to first century Israel and see how some of this all plays out. So if you would turn back with me, or back to the New Testament, we're going to start in Mark, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14. So this is going to be the last week of Jesus' earthly ministry here. So that's where we're coming into this. So Mark chapter 14, verse 1. Now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away. And the chief priests and teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. So I'm not going to go any further than that first verse here. The reason I had this inserted into the sermon is so that through the rest of the Gospel of Mark, he's just going to call the celebration the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And I wanted to show that Mark is very well aware that there's two different feast days going on here, Passover and unleavened bread. So if you'll skip down with me from verse 1, we're going to start in chapter 14, verse 12 now, the Lord's Supper. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent two of his disciples, telling them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, 'The teacher asks, where's my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." The disciples left and went into the city and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. So, when evening came, when we put things into the setting of the Passover, when we look at it from our view, the Passover happens on Thursday evening. It's not Thursday evening. It's Friday evening. It's a new day. So that's kind of confusing when we look at the events, at least for me, as I read through it. What's going on here? They talk about Jesus being crucified on Passover, but to us, he celebrates Passover on Thursday and then is crucified the next day, right? All these events are happening on the same day to them. It's Friday evening. So he celebrates Passover with his disciples on Friday evening. He gets arrested Friday night. He is tried very, very early in the morning on Friday. He's handed over to the Romans to be crucified on Friday, and then he dies Friday afternoon. It'll take too much time to read through all this, so I'm going to skip a little more and pick up again in Mark chapter 15, verse 33. At the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land until the 9th hour. So the 9th hour, and put it in our terms, is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So Jesus is on the cross at this time, and it's the 9th hour, or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is an important time for the Hebrew. 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the time of the daily sacrifice. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, every day, the priest in the temple gets the ram's horn or the shofar. You realize there's multiple priests, but that priest sounds a loud blast on that horn. And everybody in Jerusalem knows what that means. You hear the shofar in the afternoon, that sound floats across the city, and I'm sure it floats across the whole city into the outskirts where 3 men are on crosses. And this is so at 3 o'clock, right, the ram horns blows, and everybody knows the lamb dies. That is the time the lamb dies. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing near heard this, they said, listen, he's calling Elijah. One man ran, filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down, he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus heard his cry and saw how he died, he said, surely this man was the Son of God. Some women who were watching from a distance among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the younger, and Mary Mary the mother of James the younger, and Joseph and Salome. In Galilee, these women had followed him and cared for his needs. Many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem were there also. It was preparation day, that is the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in linen, and placed it in a tomb, cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance to the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph saw where he was laid. All right, so Jesus dies, and he is hurriedly placed in a tomb because evening's approaching. Evening's approaching, it's a new day, right? It's the start of the Sabbath. But not only is it the start of the Sabbath this year, it is also the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. When the Sabbath was over, I'm going to continue in chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Salome, bought spices so that they might go and anoint Jesus' body. Very early on that first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. And as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place they laid him? But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee, and there you will see him, just as he told you. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. So let's maybe just review here for a second. Right, Jesus is arrested and crucified on Friday. He dies, and he is placed in his tomb just before the start of Saturday evening, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He's in the tomb all Saturday, which is the Sabbath, so you could say he rested on the Sabbath. Then, sometime between Sunday evening, and Sunday morning, the resurrection occurs. And when they go to his tomb early in the morning, he's gone. And remember, that Sunday is also the Feast of First Fruits. One thing that I did not know until recently is that all of these celebrations have themes associated with them. So the theme of Passover, as you might guess, is deliverance from bondage. They're celebrating when God brought them out of slavery in Egypt. So this is a celebration that really celebrates deliverance from bondage. Now, if you remember what we just read, it's that when Christ died, the temple and the curtain was torn in two from top to bottom. That curtain very much represented our slavery, our bondage to sin, which separated us from God. And when Christ died, that debt, that slavery to sin, it was done away with. And God wasted no time telling everybody how he'd felt about that curtain all along. The theme of the Feast of First Fruits, it was very much a celebration of life, but it was very much a feast that was about faith, right? You brought the very first of your harvest to God, but you didn't know whether you were going to get the rest of the harvest or not. There can be hailstorms, fires, locusts, whatever. You don't know what problem is going to happen, but you might not get the rest of that harvest. The first fruits, I'd say, is really for us. Jesus Christ rose from the dead. You have to have faith in the sense in that you weren't there to experience that. But it's something that's already happened, and no matter what we believe, we can't change that. But we haven't experienced a resurrection yet. We haven't come in yet. And so you might ask, well, is there a feast or festival of final harvest? And there is. In first century, it was called Pentecost. But that's a different lesson. So, Paul in 1 Corinthians, Paul picks up on this, and I used to think he was creative until I learned this, but he calls Jesus Christ the first fruits of the resurrection. And I was like, wow, he's making a cool analogy there. He's picking up on this. He's not so creative. God's creative. Jesus Christ rose from the dead on the festival of first fruits. Now I'd like us to go, I know I'm jumping around here a bit, that before I give you the theme to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, I'd like us to go back to our story that we started with. Jesus is on the road. He's with two of his followers, and they're having a conversation. It says, as they got to Emmaus, Jesus acted like he was going on further. But these two disciples said, hey, it's late in the day. You should come stay with us. And they persuaded Jesus to come with them. In the evening, as they sat down at the dinner table, it says Jesus took the bread. Now remember, the Feast of Unleavened Bread lasts for 7 days. So it has a big kickoff on the first day, but it lasts for 7 days. So the bread Jesus had in his hands, it's unleavened bread, right? And it says Jesus takes the bread and he gives thanks for it. Now the theme of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is God bringing forth life from the ground. So, as Jesus is buried, right, just before evening, just before the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the whole Jewish nation goes into prayer and worship, asking God to bring forth life from the ground. And this feast, on this particular year, this feast that they've been celebrating for the past 1,400 years, all of a sudden finds fulfillment. Now, picture this. You have Jesus, the rabbi, who called himself the bread of life. Jesus, who said things like, unless a seed of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a seed. You have him there with his disciples getting ready to break this unleavened bread. Now, I don't know if any of you have celebrated a Jewish Seder meal before on Passover week to kind of get a feel of what's going on there. But before they break the bread, there's a simple prayer they recite. It goes like this. Thank you, O Lord our God, who brings forth the bread from the earth. Now I could just picture Jesus. He's there with these two disciples, and he gives thanks. Thank you, O Lord our God, who brings forth the bread from the earth, and he breaks the bread. And all of a sudden, this disciple, Cleopas, and the other one go, oh, 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 oh! And Jesus disappears from their midst. And they have to run all the way back to Jerusalem, 7 miles, to tell their buddies what happened, right? So, at the end of this month, the last Sunday in March is Palm Sunday, which will kick off the celebration of Holy Week. So this year, the Jewish celebration of Passover and the Christian celebration of Jesus' death and resurrection actually coincide. That happens every once in a while. If you also look at your calendar for this year, Passover begins at sundown on Thursday, which you now know is actually Friday evening, which will put the Feast of Unleavened Bread on Saturday and the Festival of First Fruits on Sunday. So I'd just like you guys to be pondering these things and be in awe of God. Thank you.